Well, welcome to the Dream Labs with Dr. Contrast Live. I hope everybody's doing well, and I just want to pick up the pieces from where we were last Wednesday. Thought we'd come back in and look at some things here on the stream. And I put this first illustration up on the screen here today. We'll be doing this biomimicry transfer from a hammerhead shark into a fighter, attack fighter, Alistar Citizen. But I brought this one back. This is the program we've been working on in facelifting for the last 2 or 3 sessions. This is the third phase of the development side of looking at a whole new Mocharon, and that's its genre, and a hammerhead shark. Trying to get the whole idea of getting this hammerhead shark, a biomimicry piece, into a fighter jet, translated from biomimicry into an aircraft or a product of some sort. So, very interesting. And this was done about 1.5 years ago, and now just about maybe 4 sessions ago, I went back and looked at my notes and decided, well, you know, it really wasn't, it didn't have enough guts to it. I mean, there's a lot of hammerhead with the nose piece and so forth, and the gunning system and the rear cockpit, high cockpit level, front nose area, and looking like the hammerhead shark, but it didn't have the real good threatening look to it as far as being a real good solid concept sketch to be really interdictive or a threat when in action. So I decided to go back and look at the record, and then for the last 2 sessions or so I've been doing a little bit of review work to show you where we were, what led us up to this design process. And then from last week's show, it was really interesting how we broke through some things, and I brought this back just as a reminder as to what the overall premise is. And we're going to start moving into a whole area here where all of a sudden we've got a whole new look for this thing. I think we're making some real progress thanks to some input from the viewers on how to take this thing, what the generation looks like. And again, this is strictly review. So from last week, this is just a little quick review. We were there. And then I went back and looked at some things last week, for example, put out some sketches that looked a little bit more aggressive in terms of basically the same premise was there, but it had that same almost overall look, for example, front of aircraft, cockpit area, trying to get that same wraparound with the Hammerhead Shark military system, but a wing system that would be kind of beneficial to a whole new look at being much more geometric, far more stealth-like, a little crisper and not as friendly looking as the one I just showed you just a moment ago. So I think that was a little plan view sketch we did. This was also a little perspective study, looking at the body form. Started to look at some things here that are interesting with that wing system. And I'm not quite sure if that's really going to fly yet, but I'm really interested in looking at what this process begins to direct us toward. I don't think I want to move too far from the overall concept of having that whole full forward wing system and then a cockpit river and a high cockpit area. I think that's still valid, but again, to get it more into a much more threatening look in terms of being a very aggressive looking form. So this is one set of sketches we did last week. Kind of change the transfer from that soft looking one we just showed you, the original color sketch, and this is sketch 1. And I put in a little bit of perspective. Not bad. High cockpit again. Got a lot more of that same. It got a little bit more geometric and more romantic looking, and at the same time a little bit more threatening. It's a little crisper and sharper, which is interesting to look at. Then looking at this guy too. That was another little perspective study based on the original premise, trying to get more of a stealth look into the whole process. Sketch 2 and the sketch 3. Went back and looked at some of the early sketches too, and that were done. Went back to a plan view that looked interesting. All of a sudden, got the idea here. It started to come together pretty nicely. Started to see some things unfolding here as we went through the process. Again, a radar dome up front, cockpit rear. A lot more wing surface here, and a lot stronger looking in terms of not being so soft or delicate looking. And this is a half section plan view. Just flip this thing over, and all of a sudden it's got that same hammerhead look to it, but it's got a real long, thin, almost diamond-like body form, which was interesting to see come put together. So that was a bit of an input too. And the last sketch here, by the way, these last 2 sketches, this one, the first one we looked at, this guy, number 1. Number 2 was put out for evaluation last Wednesday. This is the third one that was brought up in terms of interest that the audience looked at last week and said there's potential in this one. So that was again getting a little stronger in statement in terms of getting that tech look to it and not so friendly. And the last one started to open up some real doors. All of a sudden, this started to look interesting. This is the 4th sketch from last week that was looked at from the point of view of looking at some interest. And it literally started to look at like a lot more aggressive. I still wasn't happy with that very soft body form and elevation and the perspective, but something was happening in here that was interesting, and I thought the thing, I went back and looked at this sketch throughout the course of the week, and it started to imply, for example, almost like a blended wing look where it comes right off the body form and into the actual wing forms itself in the intake series. And so again, this whole Hammerhead little icon piece out front, like an attack platform of some sort, started to look a little more aggressive looking. I thought this had some character to it. Too soft yet still, but yet has some character. So from that study that was put up last week, I took all 4 of those suggestions and started looking at massaging some of the shapes and forms we're looking at here today. So here we are in terms of looking at what's happening next from that family of revisions last week to this family this week. All of a sudden, things started to break a little bit. I think they got a lot more aggressive looking. And again, we wanted that real thin body form, rear cockpit, twin tails canards, pardon me, at the back of the process. But again, notice this almost blended wing where it comes right down, and one wing over the top of the other. So this would be an upper in the elevation. You see it here. This would be actually one wing coming off the body form, and then underneath it another wing. So it'd be almost like a quadra wing split system that looks a lot more aggressive looking, especially the front elevation, for example. It started to have a lot more character. Let me go back to this just for a moment. I think we'll see a real solid relationship here as to why this guy, first pass at it, looked a little friendly. So if that one there, that's the Moricon, for example, that was done before. But look at the difference in character from one to the other. And I think we're making some real progress here in terms of getting a lot more guts into this thing. So very, very, I think a big transition. And I will say this too, from last week's stream, the input with those 4 sketches I put up for evaluation looked terrific. You know, the feedback was great and really was helpful for me to get away from the typical format we're looking at here and get back into something that was very unique and just substantial for this whole new look for this attack vehicle. And you know, I called it a Mocharon, but at that point in the game last week, you know, it'd be kind of interesting to take maybe a different shift at this thing. It was a Mocharon. Again, that was a hammerhead shark species, but I think I'll change the name here from here on in to HS-108P, hammerhead shark prototype 108. So it's just a different title to it, but the same concept of character here. So these are the sketches we put together. Again, very interesting looking front end, I think, front elevation, high cockpit, very diamond-like body form, a lot crisper. And again, this whole blended wing look where it's got this double intake, lower wing platform, intake series, and attack modules, and gunnery systems on the flanks. So I think it had a lot more character to it. And as I go through this thing today, I'm going to start building on this between now and the next stream we have together, and the next presentation we get put together. Maybe refine some of this a little bit further and get into a final prototype, do a nice illustration piece for our website, and get that all taken care of. So that was another set. This was phase 1. Phase 2, looking at this thing from a direct front end, almost on a one-point perspective. Cockpit back here, split canards in the rear, this upper wing, lower wing, and the intake series, and the gunnery systems. All of a sudden, I think I started to take some real, and then again, this whole Hammerhead heads, the nose piece, for example, with some munition systems up front, looked a lot more powerful. I think it had some real character to it. So this is where we are. That was a direct one point looking right down at it. This would create, this is an upper, this is the lower. And if we put a little shadow to it, we'll show you in just a moment here what's taking place with some of these forms that we're dealing with. So here again, that's the sketch. Let's go back to this guy. And now, there it is in perspective. Now look at the difference here. I think a whole lot more character in terms of, look at one against the other. Now there is the elevation down below, and there is a perspective up above, and I think it's starting to really look a lot more aggressive looking. There's something about this whole, again, there's that blended wing piece up on top, that lower piece underneath it, and again, this guy just connects over the top. This little piece down below splits and goes into that one elevation, or front elevation I showed you just a few moments ago. So much stronger all the way around, so I think there's some real progress being made there. So all that to say that went back in from that point of view, from those 2 studies, and let's put these in order. And then back in, I looked at this while I'm at it. Let's bring this guy back out just for evaluation here. This is a series of little plan view sketches I did. Looking at, again, there was the inspiration here. Is that going to be deep enough? Is that going to be far enough? Does it have enough concept to it? I hope so. This is where we are. So from that stat, I think let's go a little bit larger here and maybe make a statement here. There's an interesting plan form here, but everything was full rearward as opposed to being full forward. So this whole process, we moved ahead, and the idea here, and this little plan view study here, was to get this whole shape. For example, this would be an upper platform, or lower wing. This underneath this is an upper wing in elevation. So you'd have, again, that split wing system we're looking at here in the study. This one was interesting. All of a sudden, started to get that same diamond form, taking that same shape, but extending it and thinning it out as I go rearward with it. And again, here's the upper wing right here, and then here's the lower wing coming out of that, which kind of goes underneath the shape itself. So it gives it that split wing system. This one started to look interesting. I really thought that this character here could be interesting. A lot more diamond-like stretched, but to take this whole wing system and move it forward just enough to kind of wrap that thing and then get more of this body form and kind of float in the air and go rearward with it, as opposed to being almost imbalanced, full rear, full front cockpit area. It didn't have that hammerhead look to it. So I just want to take all this information right here and just push it forward, see what we come up with. So there's one. That was one study being done. I went from those plan view sketches into some elevation studies, and all of a sudden, I think it started taking on some real character here. It looked a lot more aggressive from the point of view of what we're after from the very soft look that we had here. For example, look at how this is, again, that blended wing up on top. This would have a little bit of tone to it here. Let's do this, come underneath, this would come underneath, and that's where that would be the shadow on this thing coming off of that wing surface. So this guy sits on top, this one sits below. Here's a munition system, cockpit rear, it's a split tail canard, almost fish-like, so it has a lot more character of the hammerhead. And again, the intake piece here being buried and much more, look how everything's kind of pushed forward a little bit, like with the plan view we were talking about earlier, that we showed you just a few moments ago. Variation 1, variation 2, a little slipperier here. Look at how that thing just kind of drops, comes back into the cockpit area in the rear. Again, upper wing, and this would be all shadow. There's a little bit of tone in this guy here, all shadow coming through. Underneath, and that wing is upper. This is upper, this is lower. So I think real progress being made there in terms of getting that idea down, and really kind of interesting to see how it developed here. And from that point of view, from those series of sketches, went back in and looked again at doing some very interesting perspective studies here. This is just a half study here, for example. We'll finish out the shape, etc. But I think this now really has to have, this one I think has some real merit. And if you're watching today and hopefully have some time to look at this thing throughout the course of the week, I would really appreciate some input on how this thing is coming together here. But again, notice how, again, this whole blended wing up on top, and then that lower piece down below with the munition systems, just like we had in the original concept. And let me bring that back again. I want to show you the difference. I mean, look at the difference in looking at those two shapes. So you move this up a little bit and still keep it on screen. That goes up to there. But look at the difference in the character, the personality. Much softer, much more aggressive, and I think that was part of the whole impact that we're trying to get at here, to kind of put these pieces together. So it's a great study, and just facelifting something you've done a year ago. You thought, well, that's an interesting resolution. It's a hammerhead shark transferred into a star citizen lightweight fighter, but it didn't have the same character to it that I thought. After I looked at it, I thought, gee, it's a little bit soft looking. Doesn't have really an aggressive take to it. So I think this whole second, third prototype, third sketch series going into facelifting this process is so much stronger. And I feel much more confident with it in terms of moving it ahead and beginning to refine some of the forms itself. And this is interesting too, but it didn't have that same split. I just like the idea that it's got an upper and a lower wing system. This does as well, but I don't think it has the same personality that this one does. I'm just really not convinced yet that that's the way to go with this guy. So I think it's really interesting that this is coming about here. This sketch, still a valid approach, maybe a little bit more facelift with this, but I'm really convinced that this guy, there's my half. I'll take this shape and repeat the form itself to kind of develop this study a little further. It also has in a plan view, it has more of this look. If I can find that sketch again. Go back to where that one was, that one plan. It has more of this character right here, the plan view, but all this now has been moved forward. So that gap is really going to be closed down by this coming off that design line there and putting all this forward. It's going to make a huge difference in the overall character of the shape itself. So not unhappy at all with the progress we've made there over the last few days from what the input was from last week's stream. Made a huge difference. So thank you for those who took the time to do so. And the perspective study again. And I think last but not least, excuse me just a moment here, go back and look at this guy. Here's some interesting little concept sketches. Went to a little further with the idea behind the scale here. Pardon me. And really opened it up a little bit. And again, notice that this splendid wing up on top, much more, I think, a fresher look to it, much fresher. And again, coming back in, intake area down below. This is the upper wing, and this is the lower wing. And again, what's missing here are the munition system, which we'll add in some of the final development sketches we're going to deal with here as we go down the line. But again, notice, I think the character, the personality here looks much, much stronger. Another variation on theme here, a little thinner, again with that same upper wing coming together and that lower wing, and then adding the munition systems to it and keeping it all together. And I think that really makes a huge difference. And I think what I really was really happy with was the fact that I finally got back to that essence of that strong diamond plan form and the wings coming off of that with a twin tier system on top of it. Made a huge difference, I think, in terms of putting it all together. So let's go back to this guy just for a moment. I want to illustrate here what I was getting at, but that whole idea of coming back in perspective. Once you have a center line set, just lay that down and break that in here. Now that you have that tail section back here into front of vehicle here, what I looked at was this. Going back in and just developing this very long, strong diamond. And from there, pinching that in. Picking up on center line, bringing that up and over, and coming back to this. That's the actual armature right there. That's what I was looking for in terms of coming together with this. Now, what happens here is that this drops, so that goes downhill. From that, we come off of this shape with a blended wing. Let's kind of pull that a little further forward. Let's do this. And it comes off, and the drive line is there. Bring that back to parallel. Then bring it right back up to normal surface. There's the upper wing surface. I'm going to transfer that through. Let's get this through. Let's get that through. That's going to come off of that shape and do this. Come back to this, draw through it. And again, from that point of reference, draw through it. And there's my plan form on the other side. All of a sudden, that whole shape now, and this is all blended wing, so that now comes in and does this. Let's do this just for what it's worth. I don't know if I've got a pencil here or not. I'll use a red pen. Let's put a little bit of section work in this guy. What it does is now it comes off of this. This is my center spine. So it's going to come up here, go right down into that area, down into that area. There's a section there. Again, section here. Across, section there. Again, upper, draw through it, section. Upper on top, upper, break it. Upper, break it. Now that's going to change this section back here just a little bit. That's that does that, and that. So now there's number one. Now let's take this form and rework it. Let's go back and add that wing to it. I'm going to come back in through here, take that wing and cut it right back in. Into that blended area there. Let's take this back. Let's draw through that. That comes back and does the following. Cuts back and does this. Now let's take that shape, break it up. Let's take this in. Bring that right back up the slope. Stop it there. Bring this in. Draw through it, up the slope. Stop it there. Now, let's get the cockpit in place. Let me just move this back just a touch here. I'm going to take this guy, run it back, and get that canopy in place. Up, into center line, over, back, and through. There's my diamond. Again, canopy. Enough of that, we have that twin tail. It does that, to that, and that's going to drop, and that's going to come off of that, to that, all of a sudden, see how the architecture is starting to work itself out here? Again, a very simple plan form coming together here. Now let's go back into this. Let's take this design line right here, coming out of here. I'm going to go back, pick up this, into that, run this back out. There's my connection. Take this back, cut it, take this back again and cut it, and that goes underneath. And this form comes right through, etc. I'm going to break this down just a little bit, break that up a little more geometrically. And let's cut this back. This basic form. We can also do this. We can actually lift this up and get that too. That's another possibility. That could be kind of interesting as well. But again, for now, I'm going to honor. This is my upper portion here. Let's take this right through. Into that, into lower. Kick the chin down a little bit, and pick up that same. Draw through it. Pick up that pointer there. Run it back. And pick up that hammerhead front end in this thing. Back out the center line. This actually, let me turn this around here for a bit. That actually breaks. That actually breaks. This comes out. Let's take that around the horn here. Let's kind of connect this dot. Let's connect it there. Let's connect it there. Let's put an end cap on this thing. You won't see it there. That drops in. There's that pod up front. And that comes down. And picks up that center line. Now this is now intake. Oh, let's get this up on top here. There it is. Upper wing detail, back over here, same thing. Underneath, a little bit of body underneath that form. And just rotate that. There's the overall architecture. All of a sudden, I'm starting to take on some real interest here, I think, in terms of once it's all put together. Now, when you come back off of this, there's a line there. I'm just going to get that line through. This now is going to come out and do a little bit of this. And then you'll see that line breaking back into it. And that'll represent where that intake piece is. So that all disappears. So what's missing here is this. It's going to get this out of the way. And so it's going to now look like this. It's going to take this shape. That shape goes back. That kicks away. It's going to pick up this. Now we're going to add the munition system here. It comes back to this. Let's just go for the time being, like a round surface here. Let's go back out of this. Let's go back out of this. Run that through. Let's keep this on the page here, but be in good shape. There it is. Come up over the top of this thing. That comes out. Draw through it. Pick up what that is. A bit of detail work. Real rough sketch here. Taper it down. Cannon. There it is on one side. That's what that's going to do. Pardon me, we come back to this guy. Let's kind of bring this on through. Add to this. Draw through it. Draw through it. I can pick up that cone and draw through this, and then this is where that secondary cannon will actually appear. A little bit of detail work. And a little bit of shading here. We're going to give ourselves some where that upper wing is. Lower. Again, body form, show us that that's got a bit of a bevel break to it. That shape comes right down. It's going to tell me where my light source is. This breaks back. There's that little canard on top of this thing too. Little winglet. You won't see it there. There's my shadow side there. Let's add a little bit of munition systems here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We'll kind of detail those later. Come back into the light source. I'll split this up a little bit. A little forming through here. A little deeper. Shadow into shadow. A little bit of sharpener here. Reinforce that section. Now, add a little bit more. Intake piece. And some detail up on top there. All of a sudden, look at the size of the scale of that guy. So what do you think, folks? I mean, there's the overall look at where we are in a real rough pencil sketch with this whole new Mockeron look. I just think it has a whole lot more dramatic feel to it. Let me draw it. Make sure we draw it. This is going to be a nice prototype. Oh, let me do this. Let's get the shadow to work over here. That's where the wing is. A little more impact over here. Wing over the top. A little bit of surface down below here. Some line weight change. and just a little bit of detail work in there to kind of put it together and see what we've got here. I mean, might want to push this up just a bit more, a bit higher, and then drop it. That's a little stronger. Cockpit. Excuse me. More evil looking intake piece. So that basically is going to help me right there. I think that's got it in terms of just getting the shapes down that I'm looking for in this next generation. I don't know how you feel about that, but that just looks like such a stronger statement in terms of overall shape and form. It just looks much more Hammerhead-like here, maybe simplified. This twin wing system, for example. Here it is in another view here. This gives me this perspective back just a bit here. Kind of get these guys on the same screen here. Let's see if we can get this moved up just a touch. There it is there and over a bit. And we'll get this guy down below. So there it is. There's this companion piece in the other view. I think there's something about that that's going to be really interesting to see how that very large upper platform wing works with. Let's see if I can find that sketch again here. That front elevation. Dig this out of the pile here. Should be in pretty good shape. Yeah, that's that. And next one up. Yeah, I think this one has some real merit to it. All of a sudden, look at that plan or that front elevation. A little modification down here, obviously, in this most recent sketch. But I think we've got a lot more in terms of much more impact. The upper wing, lower wing, which is kind of translated into this last sketch we just did right here. And it's also very obvious in some of the larger sketches above here. So just neat stuff, I think, in terms of, I think that's a good platform to work with. That might be the right view to kind of detail this guy a little bit. Oh, let me do something here. I'm going to correct this center line here. Make sure we're not out of whack. That comes up. That comes back. That gives me a kind of an entry egress. There it is. Cockpit area. Nice. That's just fun. I mean, I think that's got some, again, sorry to keep going back to this, but there's no question this was just not attack ready at all. It was an interesting study in getting the biomimicry piece put together, but I just didn't feel it had the guts to it to be a real good lightweight fighter, Star Citizen approach. So again, throughout the entire process, this is the third phase we've done today. Phase 4, we'll go back in and begin to refine this shape. I think it's got a lot more character to it. Let me make sure we get this taken care of here. This line disappears, and that line disappears. So a lot of float in between the body form and what the lower wing is doing. So I think it's really a lot of fun here to kind of put this guy together. And so far, so good. I think we're looking at some really interesting sets of circumstances here. Let me make sure we correct this. There's my drive line here. That's that. And that. And again, let's have a little more guts to it. That should come up. And there it is there. That kind of helps to kind of clarify where we are here with this thing. Now, I'm not quite sure what this thing is yet. We might keep round. We might go to more rectangular. It could be a nice little piece. Like we did that here in one of these forms. Yeah, this sketch, I think, has some interesting. This look is nice too. It's really kind of flat and kind of maintains the entire form. Maybe a little bit of a peak to it as well. Drive that line through, peak, drop, and then back down to normal surface. So I think there's some merit there in what we looked at today, and I just think it's got a lot more guts or presence to it. There's something about it that looks a lot more attack mode ready, and I think without question, I think interesting set of circumstances to deal with. Let me get a brush here and go back in again. So, and I think the most important thing about the whole process from last week, let me just kind of one quick little sketch here before we move. Let me just do this, gonna sharpen this beauty up. So one last time at it here. I think one of the most important things I looked at throughout the course of the week, get my fingers to work here would be good. There it is. Get that out of the way. is just simply taking the time to say, okay, what's the character? Are we looking at something like this? Is that the character we're after? Almost like an empathy study here, just with pencil. Is it that? That's one look at it. Is it another approach? Is it kind of doing the same thing? We come back in and do the same thing again. Is it sharper when you come back in and do this? Really increase that thing. Get that thing up on top. Take that spike back quite a ways, and then come back in through here and really reverse this. And again, with that same process, upper and lower wing, intake, what do you think? Either one of those two empathic studies really kind of give us some character reference as to how this thing is going to appear. And I think there's something unique about that. And really pleased, for example, that we've had a lot of input over the last 3 sessions in terms of putting the smoker on put together. And I think it's time to change the name. It's a bit clumsy. So I think the new name is HS108P. A prototypo. I think much more attack-like. I think these have been really friendly. Go back. There's the last thing we did. Here's some of the big elevation studies we did here. Kind of dramatic in a sense, give the real character to it. This is how we got there. For example, looking at that kind of thinking process and the actual shape itself. This is still going to have in the perspective that you see here. It still has a lot of that same shark-like character to it, but it's much more aggressive. And I think that's the thing that I was really concerned me when I started the project about 3 weeks ago on live. It was just that much. It didn't bother me so much as much. It just didn't look like a real strong aircraft study. So I think this is a much stronger look at it here. These are a bunch of little thumbnail studies. I'll put them out in line and just real quick review here to wrap them all up here. It all started last week, for example, with this. That's where we did last week some input, looking at sketch number 1, looking at plan views and perspectives. And taking a perspective, a little sheer with it, almost the same body form as the original concept sketch, but just not quite there yet. Interesting plan view. I went back and looked at the archive. This was done about a year ago, a year and a half ago. Interesting plan view. Everything pushed forward, cockpit rear. That had some character, that very diamond body form that I thought was, let's build off of that, which led to this little perspective study. It's a little bit too soft on it, but still, again, in the right direction. And then all of a sudden turning around the whole corner, getting that whole form in here, much more diamond-like and much more blended wing. And this is the one-point perspective of that design shift. The upper wing, lower wing, much healthier, much healthier. Plan view and elevation study, again, much more aggressive looking. But this is the one that triggered it. That upper and lower wing, that whole blended wing coming up the body form with the lower piece, intake, munition system. And here's its perspective study here, which has been magnified in this guy right here. I mean, look at the difference in the two there. much more character. Has some guts to it. I think that's going to be. This is going to be a nice direction to kind of fine tune and move into a nice finished piece in terms of conceptual studies. And let me just show you the last series we did here. Yeah, I started here, went back to these plan views. Had a plan view there. This is earlier this week, looking at plan view study. A little bit soft. This one was interesting, and just taking the whole shape and moving it forward and getting that whole for an end, all that long tail body on this thing. And then I went ahead and did a couple of, again, really quick study side elevations to see what the character is going to look like, and much more, I think, much more intriguing. And then last but not least, from that series into this, which is a lot more aggressive. I think there's something about this whole thing. This might be a little bit heavy in through here yet. Maybe open this up a bit more to take some of the weight out of this area down through here. Maybe lighten this up just a touch. But I think that the ground rules, I think, are set now. I think we've got a lot more character in this so-called facelift for Star Citizen Light Fighter. And we're going to call it HS, Hammerhead Shark, version 108P prototype. So that's going to be the new name. So maybe we'll start the refinement process next time we get together on stream here, and really start to do some damage and getting a nice final composition, get into a full color illustration, and up on our website for publication. But again, there's no question. Let me just close with this. This guy, much more too sedate, not enough character to it, and it's certainly, when against you look at that against that, totally different character altogether. So very interesting set of circumstances here to go with. So let me wrap this up here today. Much appreciate the time, and I know that, whoops, let me get this organized here. We've got let's do this, get this out of the way. We've got a very interesting thing coming up next week, the Thanksgiving holiday coming up. I'll be pretty well occupied throughout the course of the holiday. I'm sure you will as well. So I hope you tune in 2 weeks from today. I will not be in next Wednesday because of the holiday, obviously. But I hope you tune in next 2 weeks from now, and I'll make the announcement and get this thing set up for us and begin to look into a nice finished composition based on the histrionics we've had here today. And then I'll be building off of this basic perspective study right here, modifying it just a little bit. It had a lot more character to it, and I think that really has been helpful to get that put together. So I cannot thank you enough for the time and effort watching and the input. And if you have any favorites or whatever, please let me know that might take place. I'd love to help you go through some of the processing and maybe sketch rendering skills if I can be of some help. Please send me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. Be more than happy to help you all the way through the process. And if there's some things you want me to work on specifically, be more than happy to do that. And I think based on that, once we get through this Mocharon of this HS108P series, I'm going to start doing some very interesting automotive stuff, some exterior interior work, some landscape architecture coming along, some product design work. So we'll mix it up a little bit and then get into some really good project work from week to week. So all that to say that, again, please visit my website at drcontrast.com. There's some interesting things on there. I'm on Instagram. You'll see YouTube, some Twitch stuff is on there as well. So please feel free to take a look at the work I've generated over the course of the past few years, and hopefully you'll find some interest there. And pay attention to the website, because we're starting to add starting to put some real bulk behind the store for merchandise for sale, like apparel work, prints and the like. So we'll be selecting some things to get up on Shopify and notify you when that's ready to go. And if I take a long time to get that together, because we're looking at maybe a new manufacturer to do some apparel work for us and some print work. So that's taking a little bit of time, but we're still confident it's going to get there very quickly. So looking good, gang. Once again, drop me a note, jim@drcontrast.com. If I can be of any help, happy to do that without any question. And really would appreciate you looking at my website and see what you think in terms of content. We'll be adding some playlist work to it. I'll be doing that maybe after the holiday here, going through my list of videos, something 280 or something like, plus picking categories out, for example, like transportation design, aircraft design, landscape architecture, exterior work, architecture interior work, just putting a series of categories together and getting that put into some sort of context for playlists, and we'll be updating that as we go from time to time. But I really am today much more content with the fact that we've got some good advancement here on this aircraft study. Again, sorry to be redundant, but when I looked at it again, I just about a month ago looked at it and said, there's something about this that just doesn't feel right for an attack aircraft. Far too soft, much too literal in terms of a big heavy nose cone on that thing and a lightweight tail on it. Just didn't look aggressive enough as a fighter. So I think it's a really interesting concept here For those of you who've been working with me, we got input, directing certain likes and dislikes. Cannot thank you enough. That extra voice has been really helpful. Voice is very helpful. Means an awful lot when you're put together, because here you're out there just kind of rambling through some things, but when you have feedback coming in from an audience, it really makes a huge difference in terms of likes and dislikes, and it also sets a really good form of direction as well. So cannot thank you enough, gang. Have a great holiday. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks from today. Now, I'll make sure we get that back on top. And in the meantime, I'll be refining this HS study and get into a final format, and maybe start to generate some really good, interesting final color work. So all the best. Have a great holiday. And I will sign off with this. The most important part of the whole stream today is always this: never forget to dare to remember, to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much, gang. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Take care. Bye-bye. Mm-hmm.